The bonus floors in the original Super Monkey Ball are some of the most basic and forgettable in the entire game. They all exist to serve one specific purpose: to hand the player a risk-free bounty of bananas on a purple platter, setting them well on their way to earning their next one-up. In a casual playthrough, these floors provide a break from the action and pose no hindrance to your progression through a difficulty, and in a speedrun, well, they may as well not even exist at all. This is of course with one major exception: Expert 40. On the surface, this floor may not be seen much differently to any of the other bonuses. However, it is one of the most unique levels in the entire Monkey Ball series, and poses a challenge so great, it has only ever been completed by 10 players in over 20 years of Super Monkey Ball competition. In this video, we will tear back the peel and take a closer look at the fruits of E40, as well as the players who were dedicated enough to take on Super Monkey Ball's near impossible challenge. So, what is it that makes E40 so special? Well, the floor itself is nothing all that exciting, being comprised only of a ramp, a long flat straightaway, and a 5x10 grid of bananas that quickly make their way across the stage. However, when comparing it with any other bonus floor, you should notice the first major difference. E40 is the only one to contain a goal. The only way to complete every other bonus floor is by entirely clearing them of bananas, which in every case is a menial task to say the least, as they're all effectively sitting ducks. But on E40, the bananas follow a set animation path, where they blast off into the ionosphere with over 10 seconds remaining, so a goal is placed at the end of the level to allow you to complete it after this happens. Due to not having a goal, competing for high scores on bonus floors is unfortunately very boring. Typically, high score calculation for an individual level would include a clear score, determined by the time you finish in the goal and the colour of the goal you finish in. But with no goal, there's no clear score, meaning a high score on a bonus level is maxed out by simply collecting all of the bananas, and these are some of the most mindless and easy to tie records in the entire game. What's interesting though is that despite having a goal, E40 still has no clear score, so achieving the highest possible score is still just a matter of collecting the most bananas. But with the bananas taking flight with over a third of the time remaining, and a goal only existing with the expectation that you didn't collect them all, is it even possible to get a perfect clear on E40? Without any kind of route or strategy, collecting even half of them is no easy feat. So how did the game's earliest competitors fare against this potentially impossible task? Looking back at the earliest archive of Clo.net, the first proper website that tracked Super Monkey Ball high scores, there were only 3 players with scores upwards of 4,000 after months of competition. Pack Attack with 4,400, Kirby with 4,500, and CCK with 4,700. At this point, multiple players had already performed deathless and warpless completions of the entire Expert through Master difficulty, as well as completed the thinnest path on E9, yet nobody had a perfect score on E40. CCK shared a video of his replay on the 16th of May 2002, but unfortunately the link has long since died, and I was unable to track down anyone who still had the video saved. However, I was able to get in contact with CCK and ask him about his score.
I remember the path I chose on the 4700 run was a bit of a fluke, and I was surprised what score I achieved with it. I naturally tried to get the 5000 myself, but somehow I lacked the skill, patience, or both.
In August of that year, Super Monkey Ball 2 was released, and much of the player base flocked to the game to compete for high scores on a fresh new set of levels, leaving SMB1 competition significantly less active. Even with a perfect score seemingly at arm's reach, and a publicly available video of the world record strategy, months would pass and CCK would remain the king of the floor. It wasn't until the end of 2002 that interest would spark in E40 once again. A player named SmilingJack13 had been rapidly climbing the SMB1 ranks, and had been talking on the forums about working on improving his score on E40. It's impossible to tell from the archive whether or not he ended up beating CCK, but his sights were set on achieving the first perfect score. SmilingJack's forum posting of his E40 endeavours caught the attention of the number 2 player on the overall rankings at the time, SD-Kess. With SD-Kess being the first player to achieve a perfect play points run in both SMB 1 and 2, as well as the first player to complete the point 1 path on E9 with the time bonus, scoring the first 5,000 on E40 would be a fitting accomplishment for his gaming resume. In his eyes, a perfect E40 was long overdue, and on the 12th of January 2003, SD-Kess achieved this run.
I sat down with the game and said 5,000 or bust. It took the better part of the day to do it, and I was the first to achieve the perfect score. CCK's 4700 was the basis of the strategy I used to get 5,000. In fact, I'm not sure that I changed anything significant. It's fair to say that CCK pioneered the strat that became the standard way to get 5,000. I remember telling people that it was one of the most difficult things that I had done on the game. It was the only holy grail type of achievement from that era that had not yet been completed. I posted a video the next morning to many accolades. One player summed it up as feeling jealousy and admiration in equal measure. I think everybody was shocked because I kind of came out of nowhere since I hadn't been playing SMB1 for a while. I think they were also just shocked to finally see it happen. After all, multiple people had done perfect play points, point 1 on E9, etc., but nobody had done 5,000 on E40 in a year of intense SMB competition.
Attempting to put into words how incredible this run is quite the challenge in and of itself, and even after watching it, it doesn't look like anything that crazy to an inexperienced player. There are no super precise, frame perfect, pixel perfect tricks, no absurd techniques that require a deep understanding of game mechanics to comprehend, and no ridiculously lucky events with odds thousands to 1. It is simply flawless gameplay, grabbing the final banana with mere frames to spare before it would fly away never to be seen again. It's honestly tough to judge whether or not the game's developers even knew this could be done. On one hand, I find it hard to believe that the stage designers were dedicated enough to figure out for themselves that this insane challenge was actually possible, and would knowingly include something this difficult in the game. But on the other hand, I have a hard time believing a challenge this tough was unintentional and the result of a fluke. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. In order to try and convey the sheer magnitude of the challenge E40 poses, we will take a look at the few players dedicated enough to complete it, and the amount of work they each had to put in to achieve their goal. Soon after SD-Kess achieved the first perfect score, SmilingJack followed with his own by the 20th of January, with other top players of the era clearly working toward the same goal. By the 30th of March, GameCube04 and PackAttack joined the 5000 club, and following this, the E40 Roll of Honor would remain unchanged for the next 11 years. In a comment on PackAttack's now deleted YouTube upload of his score, he stated that achieving a 5000 on E40 was one of the hardest things you could do in vanilla play, being even more difficult than a deathless and warpless completion of the entire expert through master difficulty. It's tough to try and pinpoint an exact reason as to why E40 competition remained stagnant for so long, but it would seem as though once the initial 5k hype had died down, so too did interest in the level. Rather surprisingly, the next perfect score was achieved by the Japanese player Unebabu, who uploaded his score in 2014. The replay was found by pure chance years after it was uploaded, buried 15 minutes deep into a Nico Nico compilation of mostly uninteresting replays. As far as I can tell, this player is completely disconnected from any competitive Monkey Ball community, making their run even more impressive in its own right. They did use the exact same strategy as every 5000 before them though, so it's possible they'd seen a video of someone else's run beforehand. It's also probably worth mentioning at this point that I remember being told there's apparently another Japanese player with a 5000 on E40. I've heard somewhat conflicting claims about the score from a couple of different people, but to keep things brief, it would seem as though all evidence of the score has disappeared from the internet. This makes it fairly difficult to try and deduce if it was ever actually real, since I never saw any of the evidence myself, and nobody seems to really know that much about it. The next verifiable perfect score was claimed in February of 2016 by the new highest ranked Monkey Ball player on Cyberscore, Scrap651. Leading up to his eventual 5k, Scrap had 9 attempts that collected all but one banana, and stated in his video description that this was the hardest thing he had ever done in a video game. He also shared an image of a map he had drawn in order to better understand the route he needed to take on Twitter. Another 5000 was achieved the following year by Gonkwai, whose run stood out from the rest for a couple of reasons. Not only was Gonkwai the first player to provide a live recording of his score instead of an in-game replay, but he was also the first player to take a different route to the original, devised by CCK back in 2002. While Gonkwai's new route was still fairly similar to the old one, he took a creative approach that gave slightly more leeway to collecting all 50 bananas. In CCK's route, the player would start out by collecting either of the outermost columns and front row of bananas while travelling down the ramp. They must then slow down to collect the next column of bananas while in mid-air, clearing out the adjacent column and most of row number 2 after landing. They will then pull across the floor, taking 3 bananas from both rows 3 and 4, before clearing out the back row, finishing up with one more trip across the floor, collecting the last 4 bananas from both rows 4 and 3, and the final remaining banana from row 2. The reason this particular type of path is necessary is due to the rate at which the monkey and the bananas lose speed as they travel down the straightaway. Although it might not be easy to notice, the bananas don't actually travel down the straightaway at a constant speed, but instead gradually decelerate as they near the end. The monkey also slows down as it traverses the floor, but it does so at a much faster rate than the bananas, and at around this point its speed remains somewhat constant. In Gonkwai's new route, he started out the same way as the original, however once airborne picked up 1 banana from column 1 before pulling into column 2 and collecting 2 more from here. By doing this, he could then collect the remainder of column 1 after landing, and come into the front row with a much better angle to completely clear it out. He then pulled across the floor collecting 2 bananas from row 3 and 3 bananas from row 4, before taking care of the back row, then finished up his run by grabbing 3 more bananas from row 4, the remaining 5 bananas from row 3, and finally pulling back for the last banana in row 4. The reason this route gives slightly more leeway than the other is due to collecting the final banana from row 4 rather than row 2. Since the bananas fly away from the floor 1 row at a time and not all at once, the row 4 bananas stay within reach for about 12 frames longer than row 2, giving the player around 0.2 seconds of extra time for achieving a perfect score. Even with his creative new strategy, Gonkwai put over 30 hours of attempts into earning his 5k, and interest in the level would tragically fizzle out once again for a number of years. It wasn't until January of 2020 that I would take an interest in E40 myself, after repeated recommendation from Gonkwai. I also figured it would make for an interesting subject matter for one of my videos. I always knew a perfect run on E40 was an exceptionally difficult task, however this was purely based on how few times it had been done before, as well as the ability of the players who had achieved it and how much work they each had to put in. But if I wanted to make a video on the subject, I wanted to be able to demonstrate a thorough understanding of the level and explain why E40 is as hard as it is. And well, I decided the only way I could truly find that out would be to achieve a perfect score myself. Unlike almost everyone before me, I am not a top bunkyball player, especially not at the time I decided to do this. I only had a handful of high scores submitted, and the majority of the impressive ones were cheated, so going for a 5k was going to be quite the undertaking. I set out on my mission on the 27th of January and created a spreadsheet to monitor my progress. I wanted to keep track of how long I'd spent playing, my highest score for each day, and how many scores of 4,000 or above I achieved each day, as a way to try and gauge my improvement. In retrospect, I think that tracking this final variable may well have significantly hindered my progress, but I'll get more into that later. Obviously, I wasn't expecting to achieve a 5,000 in my very first session. My goal for the day was to familiarize myself with the path I needed to take. I decided to use Gonkwai's route and take the left side, as this is what I felt most comfortable with, and drew out a map to help learn the route. I soon discovered that clearing the first 14 bananas while travelling down the ramp was actually quite a lot more straightforward than I expected, but had very limited success staying on track with the bananas along the straightaway. All too often I would end up miles behind with no hope of catching up, or storming ahead with no chance of slowing down to the correct speed. At the end of my first day, I finished with 13 scores of 4,000 or higher, and a top score of 4,400, which I achieved 4 times. I had already completely decimated Silver Boxer, and was ranked pretty highly on the Cyberscore charts. By day 2, I was far more familiar with the route and how it looked from a gameplay perspective, and was ready to lunge into the upper echelons of E40 high scoring. In 3 hours of playing, I achieved 45 scores of 4,000 or higher, with my best score of the session being a 4,800, tied as the next best score after 5,000. At this point, I was just a monkey's lunch away from a perfect clear. I thought it was bound to happen anytime soon, and on just my 3rd day of attempts, I achieved this run. My first 4,900. It was a bittersweet feeling. While it was disappointing to be just a gnat's cock from rolling with the big boys and calling it a day, I was kind of taken aback at how close I had come in what really didn't feel like much playtime. My run didn't even feel or look that good. I messed up right at the beginning, accidentally grabbing a banana from column 8 whilst airborne, which completely threw me off, and I didn't even know if 5,000 was still possible at that point. But I continued the run anyway, and evidently it was. A 4,900 felt to me like the point of no return. With the next best score on Cyberscore collecting only 48 bananas, every player to have scored 4,900 before me eventually went on to claim a 5k, and I couldn't be the first to get this far and call it quits. For the next few days, I decided to really knuckle down and try to get the 5k over and done with. And this is when I got to experience E40 for how relentless it truly is. While my number of scores upwards of 4,000 was improving drastically, the number of these attempts that could have feasibly been a 5k was really, really low. The Banana's hitboxes are a fair bit smaller than you might expect, and they're unusually high off the ground, making them even harder to grab. Coming off the ramp with the right amount of speed to grab the front row of bananas was a rare occurrence to say the least, happening maybe only once or twice per hour. In my opinion, this was actually the most precise part of the whole IL, since you have to slow down from over 100 miles an hour coming off the ramp to around 60 miles per hour by the end of the row, while collecting a straight line of 8 bananas. You're then required to maintain a speed around 60 miles an hour to be able to sweep the next set of bananas from rows 3 and 4, with any minute under or over adjustment making a perfect run no longer possible. Having speed management down to a T is key to conquering this challenge, which is deeply related to another intricate facet of Super Monkey Ball ILing. A speed bump is a term players use to describe when the monkey appears to collide with an invisible bump on flat ground, causing them to gain speed. To the best of my knowledge, nobody really knows exactly what causes this to occur. However, they often take place in the same spots on particular levels. Getting a speed bump is never guaranteed and almost entirely out of your control, making them effectively random and unpredictable. In a Monkey Ball IL, a speed bump can be both your friend or your foe. In some instances, it's absolutely necessary to get one in order to have enough speed to perform a certain strategy or come anywhere close to the world record on the floor, whereas other times they can completely ruin your attempt at the particular IL. Now, you would think on a floor where the entire strategy is effectively perfect movement and management of speed, that random unpredictable speed bumps would be a total nightmare all round, and by and large they are. However, if you inspect most perfect runs more closely, you should notice that at some points most of them get 1 or 2 small speed bumps, helping them preserve enough speed to keep up with the bananas. I can't say for sure whether these speed bumps are absolutely necessary for achieving a 5k, and in some videos it's really hard to tell if the player actually gets any. But for all intents and purposes, you kind of both do and don't want speed bumps at the same time. It was also around this time where I believe tracking the count of scores 4,000 and above became somewhat of a liability for me. With no room for improvement left in the highest score column before getting a 5,000, I started focusing more and more on how many 4,000 pluses I was achieving each session. As a result, I was continuing heaps of runs that had no chance of ever being a 5k just so I could see this number go up, which was a very unproductive waste of time when this was totally irrelevant to my ultimate goal. I continued playing and racking up more 4900s, any one of which felt like it could have been a perfect run. The ending movement for the final row of bananas can be a lot more finicky than you'd expect if you come into it at an awkward angle, and I had numerous attempts that failed to collect both the vertically adjacent bananas in the final sweep. I was certain that a 5,000 was just around the corner, and at long last, on the 3rd of February 2020, this happened. Expectedly, I was livid, and this was somewhat of a breaking point for me. That run really felt like it should have been a wrap on E40, but instead was one of the most stunning instances of total ineptitude in the history of Super Monkey Ball. I managed to squeeze out one final short session the next day, adding one last 4900 to the pile. But by then, all of my motivation was gone, and I decided to take an indefinite break from the floor. During my time away, an up-and-coming master of some of the game's most difficult ILs, Eddie0777, teed up E40 as one of his first ridiculously long IL grinds. Following a 67-hour-long rendezvous with the floor and 18 scores of 4900, Eddie was successful in achieving a 5k on the 29th of May 2021. Rather tragically, 66.5 hours into his efforts, Eddie discovered that the entire time he had been playing with a faulty controller that wasn't registering his thumbstick inputs at full strength, and on his first day of attempts using a correctly functioning thumbstick, he achieved a 5000 in just 30 minutes. By August of that year, I decided it was time to lace up my banana boots once more and return to the floor myself after an almost 18-month-long hiatus. There was no particular newfound motivation behind my return, nor was I particularly concerned with even getting a 5k. I was just in the mood for some monkey ball and wanted to try some ILs after a long break from the game. By then, I had significantly more reliable internet and decided to livestream my attempts to Twitch, which I found made playing a lot more enjoyable. I also made a point of trying to stop focusing on my 4000 plus count so much, as by then I'd realised it had been weighing significantly on my progress. On my first day back, I played for almost 5 hours and was already back in the groove, with my best score of the day being another 4900. I continued to play for the next few days, but wasn't pushing myself as hard as before, or at least I didn't feel like I was. I had a best score of 4900 every day I played, and even had another heartbreaking attempt that collected all but the final banana. I also got so sick of missing the last banana in the front row of the straightaway that I decided to label it appropriately on my diagram. Unfortunately, I soon got distracted and left E40 behind once more. On the 1st of October, Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania was released as early access, and some of the player base flocked to the new game to see what it was like. I tried out Banana Mania myself, but wasn't really a fan. The controls felt completely distant from the originals, high scores weren't tracked in any capacity, and I had already played all of the levels hundreds if not thousands of times before. With Banana Mania failing to scratch my scrotal itch for Monkey Ball, I decided to go back to SMB1 and play E40 once again. And on the 3rd of October 2021, I went live with some more attempts. Yeah, should we play a game? Someone in the chat shout a score out and I'll get that score. Oh, shut up. I knew I should have expected it. Alright, here goes. No, I'm sorry. The game's been ruined. Maybe I should try the old strat. And not the Gonkwai strat. The Gonkwai strat's supposed to be easier though. But I've not been having an easy time. Okay, this looks good. I did it! I did it! I didn't save the replay, no! Yes! Yes, clip it! Clip it! Oh my god! Yes! After almost 50 hours of attempts spanning 22 months and 14 scores of 4900, I finally achieved the coveted perfect score on E40. And I forgot to save the replay as an added minus. But regardless, it was a great feeling to have finally done what I set out to do almost 2 years prior, and I'd cemented myself as the 9th player to complete Super Monkey Ball's hardest challenge, even if it meant postponing this video by 2 years. The latest player to perform a perfect run on E40 was Tony SMB, who did so on the 4th of March this year. E40 was the final replay he needed to complete his SMB1 high score compilation, and he had specifically saved this floor till last knowing the challenge ahead of him. He started his attempts on the 25th of February, going live with the title E40 ILs, the final boss of SMB1, and took the whole community by surprise after pulling off a perfect run only a week later in under 9 hours of total playtime and without a single 4900. Though we don't have the statistics from every player on the E40 Roll of Honor, it's a safe bet that Tony achieved his score faster than any player before him, and skipping from 4800 straight to 5000 is practically unheard of. And with that, there is the current history of perfect scores on Expert 40. Speaking from experience, the floor makes for a very fun challenge that you can't get anywhere else in the game. Albeit taxing at times, the feeling of picking up the final banana after so many hours of work was truly surreal. I actually enjoyed it so much that I decided to do it again while working on this video, and made absolutely sure to save the replay this time. I sincerely believe the only way to get a proper appreciation for how difficult this floor is to try it out for yourself and see how you fare. So, I have a challenge for you. Effective immediately upon this video going public, I will be holding an E40 contest in the Super Monkey Ball Elite Discord. In order to enter, post a video of yourself scoring 4100 or more in the contest channel of the server. A score of 4100 will be worth 1 entry, 4200 will be worth 2 entries, 4300 will be worth 3 entries, and so on. The video you post must be a live recording from practice mode and not an in-game replay. Any kind of pausing during your attempt is strictly not allowed. Using an emulator is fine, and if you already have a 5K, then I'm sorry, but you're not allowed to compete. At the beginning of August, I'll have Gonkwai randomly selected entrant to receive a copy of Marble Maid and an exclusive vector graphic logo drawn by Gonkwai himself. I will announce the winner both in the SMB Elite Discord and on the community tab of my channel. And in the case any new 5000s are achieved, I'll keep the pinned comment on this video updated with a full list of perfect runs. Thanks for watching everyone, and best of luck if you decide to compete. Cheers.